There's so many times when I speak to a pharmaceutical company and they have this aspiration that we want to be Disney-like, we want to be Amazon-like. I think it's a great aspiration. And then you think about Amazon. Okay, I can go on my computer, I can order anything and it's on my front step. Magical. Disney, the Magic Kingdom. You create memories for a lifetime. You forget all the standing in line and everything evaporates when you look at the photos with you and your family. Magical. And then I think about, what do pharmaceutical companies do? They change the course of disease and damage, of illness and injury. They create curative therapies for things that we used to die from and now we live with. That's a miracle. Those are miracles. They're not magic. Why would my benchmark be somebody that delivers paper towels to my front door? I think they're the ones to chase because look what we make. Look what we do. I want to be Amazon-like, I want to be Disney. That's great. But be brave. You make things that cure diseases, that save lives.
My name is Jochem van der Veer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Debunking, the journey management platform for business decision-making. We raised over $50 million and are growing globally. Our enterprise customers include Ford, J&J, the Home Depot, and Pfizer. I mean, wherever you look, understanding customers is key to staying ahead. But in order to do this at scale, aligning so many different teams with the customer journey is incredibly hard, but it is possible. I really wish this podcast existed before we started our company because so many companies are organizing around journeys and there's so much to learn. So in order to share what I'm learning, what I'm hearing with our community, I meet with industry experts. And in my video podcast, I'm here to explore the world of business strategy, design, and journeys, customer journeys, to really get an understanding of how leaders are changing their way in their business. So let's dive into the show. My guest today is Richard Schwartz. He is a customer experience leader in the life science industry, and he has deep experience in complex dynamics between pharma companies, healthcare providers, and his patients. So he has spent years uncovering why prescriptions fail to reach patients and how trust actually shapes adherence. So a champion of patient-centric innovation. And this is going to be fun for me to uncover Richard's experience and understanding how that actually is a form of medicine with real clinical impact. In this episode, we're going to explore hidden gaps in healthcare, trust challenges facing pharma brands, and of course, talk about how AI could transform patient engagement. But before we dig into all of this, Richard, welcome to the pod. I'm very excited to have you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation and share with you and share with others the massive opportunities that industry has to start to think about customer a little bit differently.
So let's start there, because when we were pre-chatting before starting to record, you said there's many companies that want to be like Disney, right? They want to bring the Disney experience to life. I even had Ryan Levier from Amtrak, who actually is pushing for a future where experience is the way that Amtrak is going to market. But you had a slightly different point of view on like what that actually means, and especially in a pharma context. So would that be a good start of our conversation today to get into that?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many times when I speak to a pharmaceutical company and they have this aspiration that, we want to be Disney-like, we want to be Amazon-like. And I think it's great. I think it's a great aspiration. And then you think about Amazon, like, okay, I can go on my computer, I can order anything and it's on my front step. Magical. Disney, the Magic Kingdom. You go to the Magic Kingdom and you create memories for a lifetime. You forget all the like standing in line and everything evaporates when you look at the photos with you and your family. Magical. And then I think about, what do pharmaceutical companies do? They change the course of disease and damage, of illness and injury in living things, in the human body. They create curative therapies for things that we used to die from and now we just live with. That's a miracle. Those are miracles. They're not magic. That is so profound that is what they make. Why would my benchmark be somebody that delivers paper towels to my front door? It's not. I think they're the ones to chase. I think they should, flex their muscles and stick their chests out and hold their heads high in the air and say, we're going to be the one to chase because look what we make. Look what we do. And that's where I think those things are wonderful to look at and go, okay, great. I want to be Amazon-like. I want to be Disney-like. I want to be like, this airline or that hotel chain. That's great. But be brave. You make things that cure diseases, that save lives.
Where does the disconnect start? Because in general, the public opinion about pharma is not great, right? It's like they're making money on the back of us. On the other hand, I think the pharma companies, they're so heavily regulated that trying something adventurous or new or, taking that story of like we basically did something magical and presenting it as such is like so heavily regulated. There might be so many more reasons, but where is the disconnect starting?
And it's a mindset. I'm not saying that they can go out in their advertising and say, this is a miracle. It's certainly a mindset. And yes, there is a need to manage and reduce risk. But, where does it come from? It certainly comes from being highly regulated. It certainly comes from the government's approving what you can and cannot say. But as a mindset, as an aspiration, like if you write your press release from the future and you say, we want to shift how customers feel when they hear our name. We want to shift how they feel when they receive our medication. We actually want people to have great confidence in the manufacturer of this medicine. That changes how you speak to customers. It changes how you care for your customers. So reducing risk, managing risk, all of that, being regulatorily compliant with the regulations of whatever nation you happen to be in, it's essential. We can't break out of those barriers, but we also can't hide behind them. We can't hide behind regulations and say, oh no, we can't do that. I think the conversation starts at the end point. What is it we're trying to change? We're trying to change people's outcomes. Okay, we're trying to change treatment paradigms and prescribing behaviors. Okay, great. What's in the way of that? Oh, these things are in the way of that, and this is in the way of that. All right, well, some of those things are breakdowns in the journey and in the experiences. How do we start to target those things differently? So if we start at the end point that we want and we don't start with risk, then it changes the conversation.
You work with many executives in pharma. How much of the conversation is actually going to the end of feeling, to helping patients feel better or feel better about our brand, but in general, like have a better experience in life or when they are having a disease that needs to be treated? Like, how much of that actually revolves around feeling versus revenue and performance and business impact?
I don't think I've met an evil person yet in the industry. I know they're out there. There's evil people in every industry. I haven't met somebody who I felt was just a complete disease monger and I want to keep them on my medicine for the rest of my life. Most of the people that I've met in the industry are in it because they deeply care about human wellness. They deeply care about animal wellness. And they're in it for the right reasons. I'm sure the bad players are out there. I don't think they're the majority. I love to live a life assuming good intentions, the best intentions. So the job to be done, the job that everybody's after is people get sick. We all get sick. It's the great leveler. And when you do get sick, the first time you might hear a diagnosis, and if you've never heard it before, it's jarring. It's suddenly like somebody just told you you're going to get this full-time job for the rest of your life that you never wanted, that pays in reverse. And by the way, you're completely unprepared and totally unqualified, and you don't get to skip a day of work. That's what it's like to get a diagnosis. And the best people that I've met in the industry, all the way at the highest levels, are there to make money. But they're there to make money through helping people be better.
What is in your perspective, what is the state of most pharma companies when it comes to deeply understanding that patient journey, right? From the moment they get diagnosed till treatment or for the rest of their life. Like, what is the state of deeply knowing that journey? Caring about it is one thing, but like deeply knowing and understanding it. Like, if you can share your perspective, that would be fantastic.
You talked about the court of public opinion a moment ago. And if you look at any of the Reuters studies that are out there on, affinity toward industry, trust in industry, doctors, nurses are always number one. Doctors are shortly thereafter, pharmacists. And then there's about 50 feet of whale crap. And down at the bottom of that is pharmaceutical companies. So there's a trust problem. There's clearly a trust problem. And, we don't talk about trust often until it is a problem. And then you look at industries that people trust and believe in. And the pharmaceutical industry will take one of the least trusted industries alongside them, advertising, and they'll use advertising to talk to the most trusted people. There's a dichotomy there that makes me scratch my head, because nobody really wants to be sold to. And they're trying to sell to points along this journey. I think we understand the journey, but then the agencies, and I'm not trashing agencies, I guess I am sort of, but agencies will come in, or old agency thinking, and they'll draw this beautiful journey up on the board. And, the people in different stages of the journey have cute names like fence sitters and considerers and all these different great names. And we just lump everybody into it. And we assume that's who you are right now. You're a fence sitter. Oh, but I'm not a fence sitter, because you've just lumped me into a segment when honestly, I'm a segment of one. And while I might be ill and I might be questioning whether or not I want therapy or I want this therapy, I'm doing it for a host of different reasons. And what we find when we really look at lived journeys that people are actually experiencing in real time is humans are unpredictable, but in very predictable ways. And if we start to understand how they operate and how they think and how they behave and how they decide, decision science becomes such a big part of it. And then this notion that I have, that I call experience as a medicine, is all about that. And it came to me one day just thinking about, why do people do well and why don't some people do well? And part of it is themselves, but part of it is this insane environment that exists around getting and giving care. And when the path is easy, I don't mean it's like free, here's all the medicine, it's free and it's right on your front. It's easy and it's easy to understand. And it's in line with my expectations as a human of what I thought this was going to be like, or I'm educated on it. And then it's compassionate. And then I use the word compassion instead of empathy intentionally. Empathy's great, but empathy's observational. And compassion is actionable. Compassion is empathy's more athletic cousin. And when it is compassionate, then we tend to do better, period. And, I started to think about it, and then I started to read about it, and then I met wonderful people that are actually making it true and studying it and doing research on it. So Dr. Alia Crum out of Stanford University has this concept of the treatment effect, which is about placebos. And people will do well when their caregivers exude trust. And Dr. Kelly Harding wrote a book called The Rabbit Effect, which is just a beautiful narrative built off of this research that was going on where the graduate students who were taking care of these rabbits they were studying heart disease in, they were all getting the same medication, but one of the graduate students would pick the rabbits up and hold them. Those rabbits were doing better. And there's 5,000 peer-reviewed studies in the British Medical Journal. There's a book by Dr. Stephen Tresiak and Anthony Mazzarelli called Compassionomics that's got a list of stories that all demonstrate the experiences we have clinical implications, good and bad. We will walk away from something in a minute that probably could have helped us if the experience goes sideways. And when it goes well, it just gives us an unfair advantage against unfair things like diseases.
Would that be a good example of what you mentioned earlier, where people are actually unpredictable in predictable ways?
Yeah. Because think about adherence to medication. We're not all extremely well wired to be adherent creatures. We don't do the things we're supposed to do. Otherwise, we wouldn't have certain diseases, or they wouldn't be as prevalent as they are. People are going to take the paths of pleasure and avoidance of pain, and they make decisions in very peculiar ways. Sometimes they don't do the things that are better for them, and they do things that are bad for them. And it's not that they don't know better. It's sometimes just that they don't do better. And they don't do better because their priorities are what their priorities are. And if we can understand what motivates somebody from a behavioral standpoint, then we create, and you talked about designing experiences. When we start to design experiences for being more compassionate, and we start to design experiences for what people expect and making it easier for people and letting them know we truly do care. We're not just trying to sell you something. I think it shifts everything. So we don't always do what we're supposed to do, but we know that people are going to go off course, and we know people are going to, at some point, get sad and give up, or get more interested in going on a vacation or going out to dinner with a bunch of friends than they are in focusing on their disease, because they're trying to live their life. And sometimes we don't want to think about ourselves as a sick person, so we ignore it.
So is the role of pharma to be deeply caring about these journeys? Is that an important one, or should we go one level up in the hierarchy, where actually the physicians, the doctors, the caregivers, the nurses should be the ones helping the patients live through that? Like, is it pharma's job to be intentional about them? And it's a leading question, but I want to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, it's such an interesting business. If you think about the economic environment that pharmaceutical companies sit in, it's a hall of mirrors locked into a bounce house, right? It's crazy. And you've got interlopers showing up. You've got, doctors prescribing medications, but they don't always have the decision power to decide which medications. You've got another party called insurance companies who are deciding, what gets reimbursed and what doesn't. You've got PBMs out there, and everybody's kind of scratching their head saying, well, what is it exactly they do? And they're working with employers, and employers are paying part of the bill. Pharmacists are distributing their medications, but don't really have any control over it. And meanwhile, you've got the proprietor of the problem the patient who has to actually take the medication. And so the economic model is really tough, but it is a partnership between a physician and a patient. And we've all had good doctors and we've all had bad doctors, and some of us had amazing doctors. And there's a piece of research done by the Physician Foundation study. It's a biannual study of US MDs across specialties, across demographics. And my favorite question, they've been doing it since 2012, is they ask doctors, what is the most satisfying part of your career? And there's choices. There's money, prestige, scientific curiosity, collegial collaboration, and my relationship with my patients. You can guess what's number one year over year.
Right.
It's the relationship with patients. These are arguably some of our best and brightest people on the planet who've become clinicians. And they become clinicians because they care for people deeply. And oftentimes the system that they work in conspires against that aspiration. And I think pharma has an opportunity to figure out how it doesn't conspire against what they want. They want to have a relationship with these people they're treating. I've been blessed to have great doctors, amazing doctors, some of the most humane and kind people I've ever met. And I've also had jerks. And the ability for patients to understand that this is a relationship. And you wouldn't stay in a relationship with somebody in your regular life who talked down to you and was demeaning to you and interrupted you all the time. So patients have to take some stewardship over the doctors that they accept and that they work with. And pharma needs to help educate people on what a great relationship looks like, but also lean in on helping make those relationships easier and more efficient for people. Provide the tools. If you make a molecule that does the wonderful things that it does, don't wrap it in experiences that are, a sales aid and an 800 number and a website with a bunch of information in it. Wrap it in experiences on label within regulatory environments that actually help people connect as humans.
Can you give an example of where you've seen that executed well, where it actually was wrapped in the right way?
Yeah, I'm seeing it now with the GLP-1s, with the obesity medications that are on market. And, the two primary manufacturers right now are Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. And they've done some really wonderful things to treat obesity, not in a stigmatized way, but it's a cluster of 60 plus conditions, either caused or caused by. And they've spoken to it very respectfully to people. Even one of the executives stood up at the Oscars and they did a commercial that said, this isn't a drug for you to fit into your little red dress. This isn't a drug for you to fit into your little red dress. This is bigger than that. And so I think they're taking a very appropriate view of a very personal condition. And they're supplying people with the tools that they need to not just inject in their bodies to reduce their weight, but also to shift their mindset and help them understand, look, nobody's pointing fingers at you and blaming you because you gained weight, because you're obese. And also in helping physicians speak to them, changing the language around, you're obese or your BMI is high, and understanding that this condition is not just physiological, it's deeply emotional and it's deeply personal. And it changes our relationships and it changes our confidence and it changes our belief in self. And I think they've taken that on in this case, more so than I've seen in any other disease state.
Do you think that's a shift in general where we start to notice it's way more a mind-body spirit, if you will,
I hope
hold,
so. I hope so.
where also pharma is now waking up to that idea, right? I mean, the healthcare system is not really a healthcare system, right? It's like, it's a sick system, treating some sickness and then keeping you on the treadmill, right? That's the economic model. But we're now waking up to this, and there seems to be room for this. Like, can you unpack some of the myths, maybe, like that people have about pharma, that, the public opinion is like they're at the bottom of this list, like 50 troughs down, sure, but like, what are some of the myths that are common, but pharma from the inside out? Like, what are some of the myths that we actually get wrong?
Oh, bad actors create myths, right? And when we don't understand something, we go right to the boogeyman, right? Usually. And like, in ancient times when people were first navigating the sea, that's why everybody said, here there be dragons, because they didn't understand what was beneath the surface. So we create scary things, we create monsters, but monsters are real. And so, those myths come from bad actors. And those myths come from people's perceptions. And all you have to do is turn on TikTok or any other social media, and you'll hear people saying that, all these companies want to do is they're disease mongers, and they want to get you on drugs for the rest of your life. And they don't want to cure disease because then they lose money. And I'm not naive, but I don't think that anybody is set out to keep us sick. I don't know, prove me wrong, but I don't think anybody is setting out to keep us sick, because there'll always be illnesses. There'll always be something else that comes about. So I think that's a myth, that they just want to keep us sick. I think it's a myth that they're just set on price gouging us and taking advantage of us in our most vulnerable moments. Pricing's an issue. I'm not going to hide behind that. I'm not going to say it's not. In the United States, 66% of bankruptcies are attributed to healthcare. Just north of us in Canada, it's 15%. That is not the sole issue caused by pharmaceutical companies. That whole network of players, that pea soup that we talked about before. So there's the payers, there's the prescribers, there's the PBMs, there's all of these systems in there. And some of them are also wildly inefficient and driving up costs. In the US, it's nearly 20% of our GDP. We die sooner than any other industrialized nation. We pay, nearly probably $12,000 to $13,000 per capita for healthcare. The next closest is Sweden, around $7,000 in the latest data, and we die sooner. So the boogeyman comes from seeing that. The boogeyman comes from seeing people go bankrupt over healthcare. But we also have to look at the system that these companies are operating in, that environment. And it's not just them. There are other players. There are other people setting prices and not being transparent about prices. And I don't think we can point the finger at one part of the industry. I think it's systemic.
So price is one thing. Where do you see we're still making mistakes to build the trust, or fail to seize the opportunity to build the trust? And that's maybe another way of asking, like, where do you see this gap?
Well, and just we're kind of wired to look at our own needs before those of others, right? Sometimes we look at self, and we look at our balance sheet as a company, and we report to Wall Street, and we do our SEC filings, and we report out our finances. We're looking at us and how we performed. But we're here by the grace of our customers as an industry. And so that entanglement sometimes causes decisions to be about profits. And I do believe that profits follow building loyalty and building trust and building respect. Look at I said I don't want pharma to model off of other industries, but I look at this device that a lot of us have, and I have a deep amount of trust for it. I have a deep amount of affinity for it. I don't go very far without it. And I think aspiring toward being a trusted partner is a very noble thing to do. But trust is not, it's not, if you ask somebody, if you want to know if somebody trusts you, the last thing you should do is ask them if they trust you. But are you showing up as dependable? Do you do what you say? Are you transparent with people? That matters. And I don't think I answered your question exceedingly well because I got tangled up in a couple of things.
Oh, that's okay. And maybe there isn't much more to it, but I think you did strike some of the most important points, right? It's do the SEC filing, get your earnings call done, focus on the short term, talk about the revenues. And that is obviously what also gets publicly shared and is big news, especially when things go wrong. So there's a lot of momentum on the financial results for pharma. So that's definitely one area where building trust is hard, right? When you're a publicly listed company and it is about money and performance. But when you think about other ways, and maybe more subtle ways in the patient journey or in the patient experience, like what are some of the obvious ways where again and again, pharma as a whole is just failing to seize the opportunity to build trust?
Well, I mean, shareholder value is incredibly important. It's the driving fuel behind these companies. But then you'll look at some of the numbers and the finances, and I look at SG&A of these companies. They're selling and general administrative expenses. What does it cost for them to sell and market their products? And here in the U.S., there's two countries where you can advertise to consumers: New Zealand and the U.S. U.S. is 5% of the global population. I would venture to say that for any given pharmaceutical company, we might be about 42% of their revenues, though. And it happens to be the only place where we have direct-to-consumer advertising. And, I think when you get those misaligned views of who your customer is and what they care about, and you start to get the attention merchants from Madison Avenue involved, it's how you end up doing things like singing and dancing about diabetes. And if you watch TV in the U.S., 1 in every 3 commercials will be for a pharmaceutical product. And I think that's a broken system. I don't disagree with advertising. I don't disagree with information. I spent 10 years at WebMD. I greatly and always bleed a little blue. I believe deeply in educating people, but I dare industry, instead of spending $47 million a month on advertising about immunology or allergy or this condition, cardiology, whatever it might be, I dare them to make this commercial. It's a black screen, it's white text, and it clearly states that the average pharmaceutical commercial costs about $3 million to produce and about $20 million on average to flight on TV so you can see it. This one cost us $3 to make. We are taking the rest of that money that we would normally spend in producing that, and we're going to seek to better understand you, the person who has this disease, you, the person that's treating this disease, and what it is you need and what's broken, and we're going to create better services to make things easier for you. That commercial would be the best commercial ever in pharmaceuticals. Everybody go, wow, what a shift. Like, there's nobody dancing, there's no beautiful people, there's no dogs running on the beach. It's actually real. It's actually a company saying, hey, we lost the script, we went off course, but we're back. And we're going to focus on our core cause. We're going to focus on science. We're going to focus on human caring. And we're going to do it differently than we've been doing it. I would love to see that happen.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. If you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access, check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation. Shaking up the system is easier said than done. And I think there will be many people in the industry that say like, yeah, listening to this, that will be great. But then when we try to do it, there's many reasons why we won't. Where do we start? Where do we start to shake it up so that such a commercial will be possible in the near future? Like what will be the place where you, if you could do it and it's going to work, where would you start?
Yeah, well, we start with the understanding, NYU Professor Clay Shirky said that institutions will, what was it he said exactly? Will preserve Clay Shirky said, we will preserve the problems to which we are the solution. And we have to recognize if all the entities surrounding pharmaceutical and pharmaceutical themselves and systems, are we preserving problems to which we are the solution? That is, are we making money off of these inefficiencies? And therefore ignoring them. Like, this is the way we've always done things is a really frightening phrase because it causes people to get sucked into this gravitational pull of habit, of the places where they're comfortable. I think we have to get wildly uncomfortable. There's a book sitting back here on my shelf that's called A Call to Action. And it was written by the former CEO of Pfizer, Hank McKinnell. And in that book, he says, if we are going to have a seat at the table where important health decisions are being hammered out, we had to communicate differently. We had to act differently. We had to be different than we were. And I love it. Except it was written in 2005 because we preserve the problems to which we're the solution. And when I pulled it down and I looked at it recently and I saw I had highlighted it in 2005, I thought, man, we've been having that same conversation for 20 years. Are we going to have that same conversation in 2045? I probably won't be here, but I suspect in parts we might if we don't stop preserving problems that we get paid for.
So we remain saying we are extremely patient-centric. And then we ask the patients and they say like, nah, I don't care at all.
I have a test for that, by the way. I've not walked into a pharmaceutical company where they don't say they're patient-centric. And I'm like, well, what else would you be? Like, honestly, what else would you be? That's like, Nike running shoes saying we're not runner-centric. Like, that's crazy. Of course you're patient-centric. But when they say it, one of the things I'll do, because, as a design person, how we express ourselves visually often tells a lot of truths. I'll ask them to draw it for me. You're patient-centric? Yeah. Can you draw that for me on the whiteboard? And there goes the circle. And there goes the hub and the spokes, and the brand is often sitting in the middle. Okay, well, there's the first problem right there. They
literally draw the brand in the center when they say they're patient-centric?
Or they'll put the patient in the center, but then all the spokes pointing at the patient are them. It's all arrows in, and it's their messages going at the patient. So we do this and we send them this mailer and we have this website and we have these banner ads and this is patient centricity. Why would you ever ask them what they want? Did you ever ask them what they need? Did you go and live with them and look at their life, living in their town and in their church and in their community and their restaurants, how it is that they behave and how they think and how they decide and the things they care about. I had a boss one time that, said the old quote of, people don't buy 1/4-inch drill bits, they buy 1/4-inch holes. I'm like, do they? I don't know anybody that wants a 1/4-inch hole. They don't want a 1/4-inch drill bit. Why'd they drill the hole? Did they want to hang a picture that their kid drew because it makes them happy? Are they building a deck for their daughter's wedding that's coming up, and that's why they needed a 1/4-inch hole? Why'd they need the hole? And we don't go to that third level of thinking.
I love that. I had Jim Kalbach on the show, who is a jobs to be done master.
Yeah.
And he has the same story, right? People don't buy holes in the wall. They want to hang this. But if you ask why one more time, it's like to have a nice surrounding. Why? Well, basically to like have a pleasant life. And sometimes we forget that we can't market that, but we also can't market the whole. So you need to ask like, okay, how do people do this? And then walk yourself down the ladder. And that inevitably brings you back to the question, like, have I actually understood what it is like to be like this person, right? And the answer is typically no.
Yeah, and that finite regress of the 5 whys is such a beautiful thing, and not everybody practices it. We get caught in infinite regress, and infinite regress is, people aren't taking their medicine, and they're not taking their medicine because of the payers, and the payers exist because they're bad people who are price gouging everybody, and they're price gouging people for profits, and it's turtles all the way down, and it just doesn't stop, right? And finite regress is a great discipline to just ask, well, why? Well, why is that? And you'll get to a point in 5 or 7 questions of, okay, maybe this is the problem we need to understand better.
I'm seeing a lot of pharma companies do invest in people in their teams that have this notion of like, we deeply need to understand the patient experience. But there's also a problem with the executive layer in many companies where they see experience as, again, a numbers game, keeping a score, understanding things like satisfaction or NPS or worse. How have you seen that gap being bridged?
I'm trying. I mean, I do. I guess I shouldn't say I don't. I see pockets of it. There's this snail race going on where these companies are comparing themselves to one another. Like, how is, X pharma compared to Y pharma? And I do think benchmarks are important, but I think the notion of rewarding resolution isn't crystal clear. And a lot of people, if I ask 15 different pharmaceutical companies or 15 people within a pharmaceutical company, define customer experience for me, tell me what it means to you, I'll get 15 different definitions. I'll say, no. 1, what does it mean to your organization? How do you perceive it? I'll hear things like, it's the omni-channel journey. I'm like, is it that's your journey? That's not their customer experience. And I don't admonish net promoter score or customer effort score or satisfaction scores in any way until, Goddard's law is once a measure becomes your target, it ceases to be a good measure. So if you are trying to improve your NPS, you can do that. You can do it without ever taking action. But it's an idol that you're worshiping, and it's not a real measure. So until you're taking action based on what you're hearing and seeing and understanding and looking at the impact of those actions, you're not doing customer experience, really. And, increasingly, it is evolving beyond surveys. It is evolving beyond asking people. There's bias in the questions that we ask. It's evolving in the unstructured signals that we generate just by our behaviors. It's evolving as we see advanced analytics and AI and large language models and agentics appear to do things in really wonderful ways. And so much of customer experience has been reactive. And, I might have some targets on me for saying this, but it's been very reactive. It's what happened. It's like market research. It's what happened. It's just what happened sooner. And then what should we do about it? I think the experience gets increasingly beautiful as it gets increasingly invisible. We have the ability to see things that are about to happen and make them never happen. We're seeing that, there's a trend toward people falling off at this point and understanding why and just making it go away. And the problem with that is you don't get recognized for invisibility. If you're on a customer experience team, you get recognized for, here's the big problem, here's the big hairy thorny beast, and we're going to slay it, we're going to knock it down, and didn't we do a great thing? And until you figure out a way to measure being predictive and mitigating things that never happened, it's going to be hard for people to do because they need to be recognized for what they've done.
So what you're saying is it's easier to focus on the easy things that have a big flashy impact.
Because I can look at my NPS and say, I've got a 70 or an 80, and then my competitor has a 30 or a minus 16, and I'm not so sure that's the best way to go, because most of those companies that are looking at their NPS, not most of them, but many of them that are looking at their net promoter score aren't thinking about it as a net promoter system, which, when Bain and company and Fred Reichelt designed that, they designed it as a system. And that inner and outer loop involved taking action. But we've taken that and we just looked at the score part of it. And the score
because
part
that's the easy bit, right? It's like, very simple. If you want to run the business and change a few things, that's where I see AI come in. It's still about the inner loop, small changes, let's do the quick things, the quick fixes. But when we want to escalate and get something on the agenda, it's like, I don't want to burn my hands on that. That's hard. Let me do something simple. Let's call the NPS responses so the 9s and the 10s are green, so people will click on them better, right? That's what we'll see.
There's been great research done in pharmaceuticals. Across Health did a piece of research on net promoter score in life sciences, and what they showed was doctors who are 9s and 10s in the net promoter score system are not 9s and 10s because you're safe and efficacious. Safety and efficacy are the price of entry. They're 9s and 10s because of better experiences, better communication with your reps, ease in getting your medication, more compassion in your materials and your resources, more compassion in helping me understand complex science. 9s and 10s are not 9s and 10s because of why you got approved by the governing body in a given country. They're 9s and 10s because of the way you behave. And 9s and 10s prescribe more and adopt more quickly. And then DT Consulting did a great study on what drives prescribing behavior. And half of prescribing behavior is driven by a commodity. And I call it a commodity because you cannot be approved to be a drug in the market unless you are safe and efficacious, unless you've proven all these things through all your studies about your medication. So 50% of deciding criteria is that. But everybody has that. Science is on everybody's side. 35% is driven by the customer experience. And 15% is driven by the company reputation. And we don't focus enough of our attention on that one slice of the pie that we can really control, the experience, that we're not improving upon, that we're not understanding. And I think it's a massive opportunity for industry to start to look at that 35%, and the 15% of company reputation is arguably some portion of the medications you're creating and how you behave in the market. Look at the other side of the pie. I spend a lot of my waking hours with my animals. I have a horse and I have dogs. And I mentioned earlier that how dogs sync their heartbeat hours and horses sync their heartbeats 2 hours. And When I go in the barn at night, which I do every night around 6:30 or so when I'm home, that is my peaceful time. And they actually use horses to train doctors and nurses how to approach patients. Because horses read us like nothing else. We've grown up with them as a species, and they'll show you in their body language if you're approaching them in the wrong way. And so they teach doctors and nurses to understand that, how the animal is moving, how it's behaving, how its eyes look, how its ears are moving, how its body is standing. They teach them to begin to understand patients that way, because we're generating signals all the time if we're scared or if we're not comfortable. And if you approach a horse the wrong way, you have a pretty good chance of getting hurt. If you approach a patient the wrong way, or anybody in a relationship, without reading that. And so it leads back to me to what do we do in digital and what do we do in our journeys? We're generating signals. We're pushing out signals all the time of how we're receiving and interacting and interpreting situations. But we gloss over it to look at operational data. We look at clicks and visits and views and downloads instead of looking at behaviors and perceptions and sentiment.
Where do you think AI is going to take us? Because if we can't even get beyond the survey response, right? And beyond the click analytics and the behavior analytics that we're getting from digital, why bother and do fancy AI personalization in the patient journeys? Shouldn't we focus on the basics first before we go with the fancy, let's outsource everything to AI, who are by definition not able to pick up on any of the signals?
Yeah, well, I think about it a lot. And there's things that we can control in terms of how they're going to change our world, and there's things that we can't. And had we ignored what the potential of this was, we would have been very focused on, how do we create a better VHS recorder or a better portable camera to carry with us? And we would have missed the opportunity. It's why so many companies disappeared, or business models disappeared with the advent of mobile technologies. Is they're very romantic about things staying the way they are. And the whole notion of creative destruction is that you are open to your model being disrupted from the inside. And the saying that if an egg breaks from the outside, life ends, but if an egg breaks from the inside, life begins. So I think the willingness to break our eggshells from the inside is really important. And I think AI I think that's the way to think about it. It is not going to not happen. Right? And I think we're sitting at that corner of gradually and suddenly, and time has sped up incredibly in the adoption and consumption of technologies. Most people that have adopted GPT, be it, ChatGPT or DeepMind or DeepSeek or whatever they're using, I don't want to promote one or the other, are learning and consuming content in different ways. They're getting really good at prompts. They're getting really good at asking questions. Businesses should not ignore that this is here, because it's not going to go away. I think the applications in research are just amazing to be able to interrogate opportunities for medications and combinations of treatments is a wonderful thing. I think generation of content and resources, how we communicate with people, how we understand people, is going to change. It's absolutely going to change. If you look at agentics, the ability, when I walk into the doctor's office and I'm written a prescription for the digital workforce to go to work for me and start doing my prior authorization as I'm walking to my car. I don't have to go home and go on your website. I don't have to go home and fill out your form. I don't have to do any of it. An agent is doing it for me. And by the time I get home, I have some deeper understanding of if things are approved or they're not and why they're not. And maybe another agent has been deployed to write my appeal if they were. And some agents are supporting my doctor's office. So they don't have 15 people sitting in the back at $14 an hour doing prior authorizations. And by the time my medication is approved and another agent is helping get it delivered to my house along with a cold chain, another one they've handed off to another one who has written the content for me that I need to manage my care. This is happening right now. And it is scary in some ways because some things that we've always believed would always be here, like our websites and our apps and our methods of collecting data and understanding people's problems and then solving them, could go through a radical transformation in a really short period of time.
How do you think about data? Because to make all these agents work for you, or let's assume a pharma company makes them available to you and you can use them because of them, like, A, people are very scared right now to share all that data, and B, they're regulated. So sometimes they can't even. Like when I work with pharma companies, like even the simple things like analyzing different segments of customer data is almost impossible in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you on the spectrum of like, should we make a pledge for like, no, you should be able to share your data so care can be better? Or should we be careful with who we share our data? Like, where are you on the spectrum?
I think we should always be careful how we share our data because of bad actors. I do think privacy concerns go to a whole other level when you start to allow sentinels to do work for you. Models where it could be an agent between your health system and you and your payer could be a narrower use until we figure out the privacy opportunities or the privacy watch outs for all of that. That data moving in controlled ways is going to be really important. And leaving that control to the hands of the consumer is also kind of scary. I know there's a privacy policy for every one of the devices I have sitting around, and it's pages and pages long. I, like probably 99.9% of the carbon-based life forms, scroll to the bottom and click the box and agree to it every single time. And that's a little frightening. So we have to be good stewards of our data, and we have to have the right people on the wall ensuring that these technologies are not nefarious and not harming us. Like, there's always been the fear that you're going to get denied for coverage, or you're going to get denied a job, or something else is going to happen because of some illness that you have. We should be scared of that stuff. If you're not scared of it, then you might be overly trusting. But I do believe we're going to figure out ways to make these things work to do good and to not do harm.
It sounds like you're saying it's inevitable that on the short term, it will harm trust more, but in the long term, we'll overcome it and we'll see the benefits of it. Is that what you're saying?
I think in the short term, we will be suspicious of it until we see it happen. We're all very suspicious of technologies when they first come out. Like, I don't know if I'm ready to get in a driverless car just yet. I'm not so sure. I wouldn't want to have my hand on the wheel. And I think a lot of people are that way about technology. I'm just not ready for that just yet. But it is coming, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon.
Are you ready to send your whole medical record to an agent, an AI agent right now?
I would. It depends on who's controlling the agent and what I understand about the agent. But I think I'm kind of at a juncture that I would. I understand enough about technology. I understand enough. Maybe I'm naive. I understand enough about the problems in healthcare and the opportunities of an agent to be my sentinel and solve problems for me, that I've got a pretty high level of confidence that I would say, yeah, Take it. I have, like for me, and I don't talk about my own health all that often. I'm in 3 different health systems with, I'd consolidate them, but I like my doctors who happen to be in different systems than other doctors. And so I've got 3 different portals that don't talk to each other. That's a flaw. That was a flaw that happened when we did not do all the connectivity and all the interoperability that we should have done, because there were competing business priorities. There were some privacy concerns, but it was more about business priorities. I would love for Jefferson to talk to Capital, to talk to UPenn, and share all my data, because right now I have to do it. And I know what I'm doing, and I understand the ins and outs of healthcare, and not everybody does that. And therefore, they don't have every opportunity to be as well as they might. I don't like having to do it on manual.
I think no one does like to do that on manual, but to riff a little bit on that, like, what do you know then about healthcare and about technology that other people might not know, where you think, like, it's okay for AI to have my whole medical record and work with that? What are some of the ways that we should be more relaxed about thinking that is okay?
It's not sustainable the way it is. It simply isn't sustainable. It is either going to blow up or be blown up at some point. We can't go on the way we are. It's too costly to be sick. It's too costly to stay well. We've come a long way in shifting our attitudes about health and wellness. I think shifting how we think and care about it is really hard, and there will always be pockets of zealots and pockets of people who are just apathetic, and then the larger majority at the top of the curve somewhere in between. And I said it before, and it might be just my personality or my wishfulness. I don't believe anybody is setting out to harm us. I do believe there are agendas that have done harm. And the more those things are out in the open, the better. But I think we work so hard on creating these technologies, and we work so hard in advancing our society. And a lot of it has been for the good and the betterment of humankind. And I just, maybe I'll go to my grave with a smile on my face, being wishful and hoping, but I'd rather do that than always thinking that everybody's out to get me.
So maybe a nice way to end today on a high, like, this podcast is called The Experience Edge, right? And if you're not thinking about all these patient experience teams, or just pick one as a new leader and they really want to make impact, like, what would you say to them to have an edge on doing that? Where would you go?
I would say to them, I would pick a place somewhere in the future of where you want to be. What is meaningful? If you look 18 months, 36 months out, what is it you believe you've changed? What do you aspire to? I want you to write it down. And I want you to write down why that will matter, what that will change for your business, what that will change for your customers. And I want you to make that your North Star. And I want you to deconstruct your path to it from there on. I don't want you to start with tactic, hoping to get someplace. You have to determine where you're going. I've gone on a lot of random road trips where we just hopped in the car and didn't know where we were going. Some of them turned out well, some of them didn't. And I've also planned a lot of trips. Some of them turned out well and some of them didn't. But I do believe your best chance of success is to design for an endpoint. Be willing to take a detour. It's okay. Be willing to change where you're going because of situations and changes in the environment and technology. But if you don't pick that place, you're just wandering. is one of the exercises that I do with teams all the time is I say, what would it say if customer experience were in your annual report in 2 years, sitting right between DEI and sustainability? What would it say? I think it would say this. Well, okay, cool. Let's write it. Let's write the headline from the future. I do it all the time. And I think it's a really valuable exercise.
I love that. I don't think that is pharma specific. I think more people should be taking that, right? If experience is part of your SAC filing, of your earnings call.
Yeah, I think it should be.
DEI is going to go anyway if you look at the headline.
Yeah.
So we're going to replace it with experience.
I by the way, I spend a lot of times inside of earnings calls and looking at, I look at what questions the analysts are asking companies, and I look at how they answer them, which tells me how they're thinking about experience. I look at how frequently executives are talking about experience and journey related things inside those calls, because it's an indicator of their understanding of the value of it.
What have you found, if I may ask?
It has been increasing, but not as fast as I wish. They've been speaking about it more, but not as appropriately as I think they should. They don't quite understand what it is just yet.
We got some trust building to
Yeah,
do.
we do.
Still,
We do.
Richard.
Yeah.
Richard, this was phenomenal. I really appreciated your perspective, and we went almost philosophic on experience, which wasn't my intention, but I'm glad we did. So Thank you for sharing your wisdom and being here with me today.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure, and I will go down that philosophical rabbit hole because I think it is important to think about it, not just tactically. That's important, not just technologically. That's important, but philosophically, what is it you're going to change in the world? How are you going to leave it better than the way you found it? Which, is kind of a wonderful way to go through life as well. If you see something and you leave it just a little bit better than it was before you got there, I believe that just does good for humanity as a whole.
Thank you for sharing this. And if people want to find you, we're going to put links to your LinkedIn if they want to know more about your work. If they're in pharma and believe what you believe, I definitely recommend they reach out to you. And I wish we can speak again. And I'm going to put that marker in a few years and see how far we can get there. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's plan on it. I've enjoyed this very much. I have a lot on my plate and a lot on my mind today, so this was refreshing.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to The Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Debunking, the AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit debunking.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge and stay inspired. See you in the next episode.